Time now for the Left of Lansing Monday Musing for October 27th of 2025. I'm Pat Johnston. The Detroit News' Beth LeBlanc and Craig Mauger released a damning story on Michigan Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer this morning. Their story details how several corporations have financed the Whitmer administration's overseas trade missions, and then by sheer dumb luck, these same corporations received billions of dollars in incentives, tax breaks, and other forms of corporate welfare. As reported in the story, previous governors have done somewhat similar things, but they usually drew money from a nonprofit organization known as the Michigan Economic Development Foundation to help fund those trips. But LeBlanc and Mauger write, and I quote, "Tax filings and internal documents raised questions about whether the foundation and state leaders have been transparent about their relationship, about whether the arrangement has provided a secretive path for influence by those with financial matters before state government." The governor's spokesperson responded by saying Whitmer is dedicated to bringing jobs here in Michigan. Not really an answer there. This is not a good look for the governor who once ran on transparency and on getting stuff done, but what it looks like is simply the same old corporate shill game being played in Lansing and also in Washington, D.C. as corporate titans trip over themselves to sponsor dear leader Trump's 90,000 square foot ballroom while millions of Americans anxiously await if their SNAP benefits will stop due to the Trump regime's government shutdown. Now, this news about corporations buying influence with the Whitmer administration, allegedly, is dropping just after news that the Goshen battery plant is a no-go near Big Rapids. As I covered it here on this podcast several times, the Goshen plant controversy illustrated everything that's wrong with our political and corporate landscape. Yes, jobs are desperately needed for that area and other areas across Michigan, and the California-based company with ties to China offered to build a huge plant in Michigan, but for a price. The Michigan State Senate last year agreed to provide $175 million to help the company get started with its mega plant project. And it should be noted that 2 Michigan Democratic senators voted against it because Goshen could not confirm the number of jobs to be created and if they would be well-paying jobs. And that's how I would have voted as well, because as Bridge Michigan's business editor and good friend of this show, Paula Gardner, reported, the state of Michigan has awarded over $2 billion in incentives and spent about $1 billion since Whitmer took office in 2019. As of last spring, those projects produced just 21% of promised jobs, and that's around 13,000 of the 65,000 promised. You see, this system of just handing out billions of dollars in taxpayer money with no guarantees for the workers or for the communities they live in seems just as foolish and corrupt as when the state hands hundreds of millions of dollars directed towards the corrupt for-profit charter school scheme in which there's little to no oversight in those schools. This leaves we, the taxpayers, feeling fleeced as our money is shared in this revolving door of corporate and government greed and corruption inside Lansing. Of course, the other ugly side of this Goshen story was how some MAGA influencers and politicians used the China angle of the project to stir up hatred and anti-Asian bias. And it didn't make sense because all they had to do is just highlight how the plant alone wasn't going to bring in the jobs that were promised, but instead they decided to go all anti-China. But regardless, the Goshen project is no more, and now the state wants its money back. I bet it does. If only, we'd do the same thing with the big 3 automakers and other manufacturers who haven't really held their end of the bargain. The working class is tired of this pay-for-play that we're seeing happening in both Michigan and in Washington, D.C., and it is a shame that Whitmer not only decided to become subservient to the Trump regime, but that she's playing the same corporate-pleasing game that the regime is playing. When you're emulating the Trump regime, that's never a good thing. leftoflansing@gmail.com is the best way to reach me. Subscribe to the podcast and also subscribe to Left of Lansing on YouTube. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter, the Gram, and Facebook. Take the battle to them.